What's up again, guys? Brian here at 3TR, and I have a very special top 6 video to share with you guys today. Now, one of my viewers going by the name of Corey Roloff actually asked me a question on my weekly Q&A show, titled People's Questions, that I share my thoughts on one of my least two favorite Metal Gear Solid games in the franchise. However, I thought that this question was so awesome that it deserved its own video, so here we go. Now, to clarify a few things, I'm only going to be focusing on the games in the franchise that are official canon. So I'm not going to be really spending a lot of time talking about games that are like outside the norm, like Metal Gear Solid, the graphic novel, or the Acid games, or Metal Gear Solid, Metal Gear Rising. But if you want my initial thoughts on them, I think the Acid franchise has a lot of ambition, has a lot of really creative ideas, but I don't think it really works very well as a card game. And in terms of Metal Gear Rising, very, very surprising, which is proof that Metal Gear can actually be more than just a stealth game, and it actually works very, very well as a hack and slash, and I really can't wait to see what they do with Metal Gear Rising 2, because I don't count this as official canon, and therefore it works and doesn't ruin the integrity of the Metal Gear Solid storyline that I cherish and enjoy. So those are just my initial thoughts on the games themselves, or the ones that stand apart from official canon. So with that out of the way, I will jump right into the official canon game, starting off with number 8 on the list, and that is Metal Gear, the very first Metal Gear. This is definitely something I think everybody should be playing if you are Metal Gear Solid fans, because it's the first in the franchise, and it really just showed kind of the beginnings of Hideo Kojima's journey of being a game director. It's not nearly as good, and it certainly has a lot of problems. The stealth element really isn't implemented very well. The boss fights are very boring. The story isn't very well detailed or described, and it builds the foundation to what the Metal Gear Solid franchise would evolve into, but the foundation isn't very good, and that's why it is my least favorite Metal Gear Solid game in the franchise. Going on to number 7, I picked the sequel, which was a very, very massive improvement on the original Metal Gear game, titled Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake. This one, I think, improved on everything that was wrong with the first game. I didn't recognize too many typos. I think the gameplay was a little bit more fluid. The stealth element was much, much more enhanced this time around. The story was given much more detail. However, if there's any one problem that I think even to this day it stands, is that they need to remake these two games, because my biggest problem with the original two games is I do not agree with how Big Boss was defeated. Now, we all know how much of a badass Big Boss is, and we know that even going into Phantom Pain, he's going to do even more awesome stuff. I cannot believe that in this timeline, in this storyline, that this awesome character Big Boss gets defeated by a rookie agent who uses a lighter and a can of hairspray. I am not making that up. That is how he beats Big Boss. A lighter and a can of hairspray. That's how Big Boss is defeated. You gotta change that. Anything else, hand-to-hand combat, a shoot-at, but not a can of hairspray and a lighter. Come on. That didn't work then, and it doesn't work now. They gotta fix that. That makes absolutely no sense, seeing how what Big Boss has gone through, and that's why it's number 7 on my list. Going on into number 6, I picked Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of the Patriots. No, not Sons of the Patriots. Sons of Liberty. Yeah. And the reason why it is number 6 is it's very misleading, because I don't really feel that Metal Gear Solid 2 was really a good installment on its own. It feels more like a setup game to go into Metal Gear Solid 4. The inclusion of Raiden, which, I will say, the inclusion of Raiden was one of the biggest deceptions in gaming history, in my opinion, because it is an amazing achievement that Konami and Hideo Kojima were able to keep Raiden a secret up until the day of release. And if you actually do your research and actually do look up into the promotion of this game before its release, you'll notice that a lot of the levels that we play as Raiden were actually being played with Solid Snake, and so it was a massive deception. But however, I don't think this is something you could pull now, which is why I think it was an amazing achievement for its time. But it's very misleading. A lot of the characters aren't very well developed. I can't get over the idea of Raiden running around doing cartwheels but naked and punching people. Solid Snake is very, very underused, which is kind of disappointing. However, it is not a bad game. It is a good setup game for Metal Gear Solid 4, which I will be talking about later on in this video, and that's why it's number 6 on this list. Going on into number 5, I picked probably one of the most underrated video games of all time, and that is Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops. Portable Ops, to me, is something that really needs to be acknowledged, because a lot of the gameplay elements that we are going to see in Phantom Pain were also used in Peace Walker, but they started here. I mean, even in terms of story, this is really where Big Boss as a character develops from being a solo person into a leader of soldiers. It happened here. It didn't start in Peace Walker or Phantom Pain. It started here, and I really hate how supposed Metal Gear Solid fans don't like to acknowledge this one. Even Hideo Kojima acknowledges that this is canon. And heck, this is also where we first meet Frank Jaeger, who would become Gray Fox, which is one of the most beloved characters in the Metal Gear Solid franchise, and I'm surprised even those fans don't like to acknowledge him in this game. He's an awesome character. Now, the game, in terms of gameplay, is a little bit limited, and it hasn't aged too well, but I do find a lot of enjoyment, and I still play it to this day when I get a chance. And it's actually one of the prime reasons why I still continue to hold on to my PSP and pop this out every once in a while. So if you haven't had a chance to play this game, please do. It is very underrated, and once you get into the story, you will love it, hopefully as much as I do. That's why it's number 5 on this list. Going on into number 4, I picked Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker. Peace Walker is a massive improvement over Portable Ops in terms of a portable game, and I thought it worked even better once they ported it over to consoles. The story was very, very well written. The characters were very well realized. The gameplay was much enhanced. The boss fights, for me, are some of the most unique. However, in terms of story consistency, I find it a bit weird that in the Metal Gear Solid franchise, they have created machines which put Metal Gears to shame, and yet they've never been mentioned before or even after this game. However, this does kind of show the roots to what we are going to be doing in Phantom Pain, and we do get to build our first Metal Gear. Unfortunately, we don't get to really use it in person. We get to fight against it, which I thought was pretty cool. But Peace Walker is definitely, certainly, a solid entry in the franchise. It's certainly one of the top favorites I've heard amongst fans, and it deserves that title very, very much in my opinion. That's why it is number 4 on this list. Going on into number 3, we gotta go semi-old school, and I picked... Now, I can't really decide which one is better. Some people like to debate which version is better, but I'm gonna pick both of them just and save time. I'm picking Metal Gear Solid 1, also going with Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes, which, in my opinion, they're the same game. It's just one's an upgrade over the other. This is really the first Metal Gear game I ever got a chance to play, and if you are a Metal Gear Solid fan now, there's a chance to know that this really was your entry into the franchise. And it's still an amazing game to this date. It really did set the foundation. It set the bar in terms of cinematic storytelling, in which a lot of games these days, which try to tell cinematic storylines, kind of get criticized for. I mean, they have really semi-long cutscenes in this game, and in my opinion, Metal Gear Solid is the only franchise that can actually get away with telling a cinematic story in this fashion. I mean, I don't even think games like Uncharted or The Last of Us, in my opinion, have matched the quality of storytelling that is in the first Metal Gear Solid game. That's just for me. And it does have some of the most memorable boss fights of all time. And it's also the first game that kind of implements the concept of breaking the fourth wall and kind of messing with the player. I mean, who can remember the first time fighting against Psycho Mantis, and he's like, you're trying to fight this guy and it's not working, and he starts talking to you outside the screen. He like looks at your memory card and he sees what other games you've played, and then a whole thing of, put your controller down on the ground, and he ends up moving it. I thought that was really, really very creepy at the time when I first played this, but it definitely has its moment in gaming history for me, and that's why I put it as number 3 on this list. Going on into number 2 on my list is my all-time favorite PlayStation 3 game of all time, which was also the very first PlayStation 3 game I ever bought, which I actually picked it up even before I had a PlayStation 3, and that is Metal Gear Solid 4. This game does such an amazing job of closing off the franchise that it is almost criminal that other people don't love it as much as I do. This really did answer all the questions that the entire franchise had set up, and which is why I'm really, really concerned about what they're going to do with Phantom Pain. I really don't want them to do something where they ask questions and they don't answer them, because this really did answer all the questions. It connected all of the plot lines. It explained how all these characters are connected, and it pretty much showed really how the events from a certain game, which I will be talking about next, affected the entire storyline. And it's such an amazing, well-done story. Some people criticize that it has too many long cutscenes, which, if I remember correctly, I believe the last cutscene is like an hour and a half. But I've beaten this at least 20 times, and I have never once skipped a cutscene. I do enjoy sitting down, getting some popcorn and enjoying the story, because it is an amazing story. It is very emotional. It's a great send-off to two amazing protagonist characters, and not just Metal Gear Solid history, but video game history in my opinion. And that is why Metal Gear Solid 4 is my favorite PlayStation 3 game of all time, and my second favorite Metal Gear Solid game in the franchise. Which leaves only one left, which I'm sure some of you guys saw this coming since I've talked about it so many times. And my all-time favorite installment in the Metal Gear Solid franchise is, without a doubt, Metal Gear Solid 3. There is no question. Metal Gear Solid 3 is the best in the franchise. It has some of the best gameplay elements, of including using the use of camouflage and using stamina. It has some of the most creative boss fights. It has some of the saddest moments, and not just the Metal Gear Solid franchise, but video game history. I mean, it even has one of the most important characters in the Metal Gear Solid franchise very well detailed in the boss, which I believe the boss is probably my second favorite character in the entire franchise, even more so than Solid Snake, because her ideas set the standard for the entire storyline of Metal Gear Solid. Her ideas is really what caused the conflict. And so it all started with this game. You would not even have the great storyline that we have with the Metal Gear Solid franchise if it weren't for everything that happened in 3. And it set the standards. If you cannot make a game that is at least on par with this game, if not succeed, then you do not deserve to call it a great Metal Gear Solid game. And trust me, there are good Metal Gear Solid games, and there are great Metal Gear Solid games, and this is the top of the bunch in my all-time favorite Metal Gear Solid game of all time, which is 3. And that is my list of my least 2 favorite Metal Gear Solid games. Now, if you are a Metal Gear Solid fan like me, please share your list in the comments down below and tell me, what are your least 2 favorite Metal Gear Solid games in the franchise? And if you like this video, feel free to like, comment down below, and please subscribe to check me in my future videos. And if you guys have any more topic video ideas you would like me to do, please also share them with me in the comments down below, because we are entering a bit of a drought in terms of games, so I really want as much content coming out from this channel as much as possible. And like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I'll see you next time.